The weirdest YouTube apology video ever made. It seems like YouTube apology videos are becoming way too common. Find a channel with a few million followers that you've never seen before, and there's about a 50-50 chance the creator will have made people angry at some point and posted a self-serving apology video about it. But these things are usually straightforward. The one I found recently left me with a lot of questions, and I'm not really sure if I want the answers. But I'll start from the beginning. If there's one thing I can't stand, it's these drama videos that pop up time and time again on YouTube. I swear I have zero interest in these things. I just want to hear your thoughts on the angry beavers. I'm not here for this. But the algorithm refuses to release me from its grips. The worst is these stupid apology videos. It's always the same thing. Smudge your makeup so people know you've been crying, start the video with a heavy sigh so we know how much this has all been weighing on your chest, then spew the most formulaic nonsense you can and wait a month until your fans forget all about the controversy. Congratulations, you're a good person again. Every time I see a thumbnail of someone wearing an oversized gray sweater and wiping away tears, I feel myself gagging. But I'll admit, I click on these too. There was this one illustrator I was a fan of. Their art was creepy and stylized. They started making videos about their creative process, and I ate them up. One day I saw this news come up about them. Suffice to say, none of it was good. Apparently, you can be creative and talented, but still be a massive mountain of garbage. Eventually, they came out with an apology video. It was tragically predictable. I swear I could see him reading from a script just off camera. I don't watch that channel anymore because the evidence against them was pretty tight, but watching their apology caused yet another apology video to wind up on my suggested feed. It was simply titled, "I'm really sorry." The thumbnail showed a man wrapped in a blanket and scratching the side of his head. I rolled my eyes, but I was intrigued when I saw the video only had 14 views. Something primal activated in my brain. With a view count so small, it seemed like I had stumbled upon something very personal. I had to know more. I clicked on the video. The channel only had 2 subscribers, and barely a handful of other videos. The channel was called something like Diabolical Muffin Top, I don't know. The video was grainy, recorded with a cheap webcam. There was an intense buzzing from the microphone. The pixelated man had one of those faces where you can't tell if he was 20 years old or 50. His skin was tan and his head was shaved. He sat on the floor in a white wife beater. The room around him was nondescript. It looked like a dorm room with next to no visible furniture. I cannot tell you how enthralled I was at this point. This was all so mundane and vague, it felt like I was in on a secret. His voice was full of gravel, like he hadn't slept in a few days. His eyes looked heavy. The way he was hunched, it looked like it was a struggle to sit upright. At first, he repeated a lot of lines I'd heard before. It was a stupid mistake. I want to be better. I hope that I can grow from this. It was generic, but it was strange to hear, since I didn't know what this man was apologizing for. But it felt genuine. I started to feel guilty, like I shouldn't be watching. Tears formed in his eyes as his voice became shaky. "I wish I could take it all back," he said. "I miss all of you." After a moment of silence, he suddenly stood up. He just stood there for minutes. During this time, I noticed shadows on the wall behind him. They were soft and hard to make out against the amber lighting of the room. The screen went black, and the video ended. I wasn't satisfied. I clicked his profile and found this was actually his first video. The next was titled Peaky. I noticed his most recent video was titled I'm Sorry Part 2, but I felt like I'd ruin the surprise if I jumped right to that one. I clicked on Peaky. It was just a close shot of a blue eye. It was off-putting because a light kept shining on the eye and then retreating, but the pupil never dilated. You could also see someone's fingers prying the eye open. The video was only 47 seconds long, and the eye never moved. It looked unnatural, like a prop. I went back to the previous video to see if the creator's eyes were that blue. It was hard to make out, but I don't think they were. Another video showed him lying in his bed. This one was titled Good Night. The room was dim, but there was a hazy illumination. This video was long, and the audio was rough, but you could hear something muffled in the background. It was a dragging sound, like someone moving furniture around. Then the door to his bedroom began to creak open. As the light from the hallway crept in, He scattered like a bug against his headboard. I could see the clump of pixels around him beginning to vibrate as he started to shake. He was whimpering like a punished dog. Whoever opened the door just stood there. You could only see their arm, but it was at a strange angle, like they were as tall as the ceiling. After a few minutes, they start to enter, and the YouTuber started to howl. I was right about the figure's height. They had to bend over to get in. Their head was oddly shaped, as if chunks were taken out of it at a jagged angle. The YouTuber backed away more, like he was trying to back all the way through the wall. Even the static warped away from the tall figure like it was trying to avoid them. I felt my stomach turning. The figure looked towards the camera, and small blue lights beamed from the front of its face. Then the video ended. I sat there for a moment, collecting my thoughts. I watched the video again, and couldn't help but feel nervous. The next video was called Outside. It started with the man on the floor like the apology video. Also like the apology video, he kept saying he didn't mean for any of it to happen, and he just wants to leave. The lighting was exactly the same. He leaned forward and grabbed the camera. At that point, I paused it to get a better look at him. He had dark lines on him, as if deep gashes had just healed over, but the quality was too poor to make him out well. I kept watching. He carried the camera to the door and grabbed the knob. I had to watch the next part a few times to make out what happened. It seemed as if he put his ear to the door, but all I know is that his breathing was horribly erratic. It almost frustrated me to listen, as this man breathed directly into the camera's toaster-quality microphone. My heart raced in ways I wasn't comfortable with. He eventually pulled the camera back and opened the door, revealing a hallway with the same canvas-brown wall and dim lighting as his room. He stepped out and panned the camera, showing absolutely nothing. Just a 10 or 15-foot stretch of hall on either side, with a blank wall at each end. No pictures or other doors to be seen. There wasn't even any molding, just brown walls and even browner carpet. He ran his hand along the walls. No exit to be seen. He was closed in. He walked all the way around and wound up back at his door. Then he pointed the camera at the end of the hall. Static started swirling like a snowstorm. From the flat wall, an outline formed. It looked like a pipe had burst and started soaking the wood, causing a dark spot. The camera's poor quality refused to enter that inky darkness, and it appeared clearly compared to the rest of the hall. The tall creature from before started climbing out, and it was clear that the picture quality wasn't what made it look inhuman. That's just how it was. Those bright blue beads on its head peered out from the dark spot. My breathing matched the YouTuber's at this point. It felt like the thing was looking at me, like it could see me. As the monster crawled out from the pits beyond the hallway, the video ended. Cool beads of sweat ran down my forehead. There were only 2 videos left. I couldn't just not watch them, right? The next video was just the man sitting on the edge of his bed, the monster crumbling at his feet. His hands were covered in red. He was repeating something I couldn't quite make out, but there was an air of triumph. I kept expecting the monster to move, but even the lights in its eyes failed to shine. As the video went on, the creature became more shrouded in static. Its limbs became shorter, and its head started to shrink and smooth out. As it collapsed in on itself, it started to look more human, and all the man did was stare at the mess on its hands. He then pulled his fingernails across his face, reopening the scars I'd noticed earlier. He looked into the camera, then got up and turned it off. If you made it this far in the video, consider liking and subscribing for more videos coming. I was now at the last video. I'm Sorry, Part 2. It must have started just minutes after the last video ended. His face was still slick with fresh blood from his reopened wounds. He sat on the floor like in the first video. The creature that had been slumped against the bed was now moved somewhere out of frame. He began speaking. He said it wasn't supposed to happen like this. It was supposed to be simple. He said with a laugh that it was too late now. He crossed the line and now had to deal with his decisions. It was so strange to hear this jargon I'd seen YouTubers use before to passively hand-wave their actions, but in the bizarre context of what I'd just seen. What could he possibly have done to wind up here? Was it a punishment? For all the apologizing he did, he must have done something. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't wrap my head around anything I had seen on this channel. I could only watch as he continued barfing out the same script I had heard from others. He stopped talking mid-sentence and looked into the camera lens. The camera's focus on him went in and out. The way he gazed, it felt like he had suddenly become aware of my existence, like he could feel I was watching him. His gaze wrapped around my heart and squeezed. A pain formed in my chest, and my abdomen started churning. Fear blanketed me like cellophane. "This is the last time," he said. "I promise." The man reached forward, grabbing the camera and picking it up as he stood. The blanket dropped from his shoulders, and I could now see that he was shirtless. His chest was littered with scabbed-over scars that cut pathways through the static. He was mangled. You'd have thought a pride of lions had just thrown him away. "I'm sorry to all of you," he whispered. There was something in his eyes. It felt as if he had settled on a choice, something that he had been mulling over for quite some time. Slowly, very slowly, he started to turn the camera around. It was at this point I realized that I had only ever seen one portion of his room. I'd never seen what was beyond that one camera angle. As the camera turned, I wasn't surprised to see that the walls were devoid of decoration. It was just the same spoiled milk color, until the lens suddenly met with a black mass. It looked like a dense forest of thin trees. I struggled to make out what I was looking at. He started backing up, offering more and more of the view in front of him. Bodies. I hate just cutting to the chase, but I don't know what else to say. They were bodies. All of them were so tightly packed together, it was hard to tell where one began and the other ended. Their frames were dark, like the creature that had come into his room. All of them hung from the ceiling, like ornaments on a Christmas tree. They gently swayed, bumping into each other, thick ropes strung around their necks to keep them suspended. They were shaped more like people than the monster I had seen a few videos ago, but they didn't stay that way. As the man kept the camera focused on this scene, I began to see that now and then their bodies would shift. They would begin to transform and crack back into the jagged and lengthy shape of the monster. Their bodies would rattle and moan as their skulls snapped and twisted into horrid silhouettes. Then they would bounce around, trying to be free of the noose. Every time, however, their bodies would eventually go limp and give up before slowly reverting back into their human shape. It was a cycle. They would transform, struggle for a while, and then revert back. Brief moments of consciousness and a desperate fight for air, only to perish once again. There were 12 minutes of this, just seeing those blue eyes open and shut. I couldn't tell how big the room was or how many bodies there were in total. It seemed like well over a dozen, all fighting for a little more space. After the full 12 minutes, I heard the man saying from behind the camera, "I'll find a way to fix this." And then the video just ended. I sat in my seat for a while, feeling like I couldn't move, or rather like I didn't want to, as if moving would somehow be confirmation of everything I had seen, and staying motionless could keep time from moving forward. I didn't want to come to grips with it. The sun had started peeking through my window at some point. I must have been sitting there for hours. I'd occasionally view the videos again, trying to find some kind of credits, or even coded messages. Anything to show me that what I witnessed was a fabrication. After enough clicking back and forth, searing the images of those videos in my mind, I was left with only questions. Now here's the part you'll hate. Upon trying to revisit the user's page, I'm now met with a deactivated account. I discovered this when it recently dawned on me that I should have somehow documented what I'd seen. Funny how that works. Now this written recounting of it is all I have of the experience. All the same, it's there, scratching at the back of my head. I'm trying to connect the dots where there are none. It's all just one meaningless question pulling against another. This is easily one of the most abusive parasocial relationships I've ever been pulled into. But I keep my eyes open. Maybe I'll one day see his face on my screen again, and finally be able to get it out of my head. I'm always afraid that I'm going to leave my room and find that it's all gone, that I have only a hallway. That fear feels like it's closing in. Maybe I'm paranoid, although my eyes are blue. I'm sorry I don't have more answers or information. I'll try to do better. I was very disappointed that I couldn't find a YouTube channel called Diabolical Muffin Top. I know the original poster claimed it was deactivated, but I was still hopeful. It's been 5 years since Petscop, and we need a good makeshift creepypasta channel to fill the void. If you don't know what Petscop is, feel free to look it up. If you have a taste for slow-burning horror that focuses more on atmosphere than on the extreme scares most creepypastas are turning to these days, you'll thank me. I had to cut a lot of this for length, so check out the original story if you're interested. Most of the edits didn't take too much away. A lot of it was toward the beginning, where OP is grousing about YouTube. There's also a recurring theme that got a lot more attention in the original version, where the static clears whenever something scary is on screen. The implication is that even the 480p itself is afraid of the monster. Since I needed to make cuts anyway, it felt sensible to cut the part where OP decided to anthropomorphize cruddy video quality. It also drew attention to a possible issue with the story. I know bad cameras exist, but the reason so many amateur YouTubers have poor video quality is because they're saving on budget by using the webcams built into their laptops. Based on the camera movements described, that's not meant to be what's happening here. In any case, while we know this story was all in good fun, there are certainly enough real creeps out there posting content. If you don't believe me, look up I Feel Fantastic by Tara the Android. Have you ever seen anything creepy on YouTube that made you scratch your head and wonder about the person who posted it? If so, feel free to share it with everyone in the comments below. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.